What's going on, Tamers? It's me, humble servant of Mirage Galgamon, aka the Tax Wolf, and let me tell you, these Shine Greymon players definitely ain't paying their taxes. So we're coming up on just about a month of the BT13 versus Royal Knight set being released here in Japan, and we're coming up on our 4th week of events overall. After last week's big shakeup of results, it feels like this week things have kind of returned to normalcy. So let's take a look at the decks that topped over the course of the past week, a couple of key takeaways, and a closer look at some of those decks specifically. So as we look at last week's results, you'll probably notice first off that Royal Knights has made a bit of a recovery here. Meanwhile, Belphegor stonks are down horrendous. And strangely enough, that with the fall of Belphegor from last week, then we're going to see the rise of Beelzemon again. So it feels like all the purple players were just trying out Belphegor for a week, and seems like, despite the fact that the deck did very well for itself, feels like they didn't feel like the deck was strong enough, so they've gone back to Beelzemon for this reason. Despite the restricted list being announced but not being in effect until April 1st, which is actually this coming week, we're going to see War Greymon still take a couple of wins. While some players are, of course, still running 4 copies of Greymon X Antibody, because, of course, why wouldn't you? There are some players who are giving it a shot with the restriction already in place, and they're still finding results with the deck. Also, speaking of the Tax Wolf, looks like it is finally Mirage Galgamon's week, taking home at least 6 wins over the course of the past week, almost putting itself at the ultimate level here, and it feels like this deck has really made some gains. This is just my opinion, but I feel like the deck does have some very strong combos once you get to the level 6 and level 7 burst mode. However, I think it is a little bit execution heavy, and maybe players starting to figure things out. We'll keep an eye on this deck over the next few weeks to see if players are starting to actually make the big plays here, or if it's just a one-hit wonder. We also see Rosemon and Rosemon Burst Mode putting up some solid numbers over the course of the past week as well. And right under that, we've got decks that we've probably seen before here. Again, I think the Champion and the Rookie decks are at a pretty consistent level at this point, where we've seen things like Blue Flare, Gallantmon doing well, Hunters, Alphamon. A couple of Chaosdramon have snuck up in here, which is good to see. I think that Chaosdramon and more specifically Mugindramon or Machinedramon are a decent counter to Marcus, but right now it feels like Marcus does outpace them, so trying to get to your Chaosdramon or Mugindramon fast enough is the important thing here, and it feels like players might be figuring this out. And then rounding this out, we've got Examon as well as Red Hybrid. Meanwhile, at the very bottom here, this is a really cool deck I want to take a look at. If you've ever taken a look at some of the Gizemon cards, the purple cards that are used in the Belphegor deck, then you might think, wow, these cards seem really useful. And I feel like other players have felt the same way, and because of that, they have built the Gizemon engine into Anubismon. And because Gizemon can recycle themselves when they're destroyed, Anubis takes advantage of this in giving those new Gizemon who are played rush, and so they can attack immediately. And as long as you have cards in the trash, you can continue to cycle and chip away at your opponent's security. Outside of this, we see some pretty standard stuff as far as the in-training decks are concerned. Things like Beelstar, Bloomlord, Quartzmon, Gamamon is still there, Grand is doing well, Jellymon pops up again. This deck is popped up a couple of times over the past couple weeks, only like 1 or 2 tops, but I feel like it might be worth taking a look at what a Kintarosmon deck actually looks like, because it has been seeing some success. And then rounding out this list, we've got Yellow Hybrid Security Control and Crossheart. And so now let's take a closer look at some of the decks that have topped. So one of the decks I want to highlight is definitely going to be War Greymon, because we're just a couple of weeks away from this deck getting hit with the restricted list updates, and this is one of the decks that have already taken their restriction list into account. And looking at the deck, it really just feels like this is an Agumon, Greymon, good stuffs deck. So I have seen some things like the yellow-red Agumon in this deck list before, because it's just a really good search card, but the red-yellow Agumon from BT13 is a new addition for me. So this guy is banking on you getting one of your red tie tamers up, and when you do that, he's going to get memory every single time he's on the board every turn. Now you're probably thinking that's a little inconsistent because we're only running 2 of the red tie tamers, meanwhile we're running 4 of the black ones. Maybe a 3-3 split would be better. But this deck doesn't feel like it has the problem of getting those tie tamers down, because we're running lots of Greymon who do that for us. For example, 2 copies of the black-red Greymon for BT12, who just plays the tie tamer if there's not one on the board already. Also, the EX1 Greymon, I completely forgot this effect even existed, where you could just play a tie tamer whenever you attack. And then we also see things like the black-red metal Greymon, who lets us play a tie tamer if our attack target is changed. Now you can see that he's mitigating the loss of the black-red Greymon X antibody by just slotting in some of the older Greymon X antibodies, because their effect, while not as good as his, is still pretty dang good. And then the top end of this deck just has lots of burst potential for damage. We see things like a Metal Greymon X antibody for the security attack +1. We've got the Black War Greymons here for tamer control, which is important against Marcus. If they get those 4-cost Marcuses down, he's able to destroy them. Also, we see the Gaiomon here, who's able to just melt security, and then you can also digivolve him into another Gaiomon, who just has Sec +1 inherently. And then another card folks thought was going to get hit in that random restricted list update, but somehow ended up ducking and weaving it. It's going to be 2 copies of the Hades Force here. And then surprisingly enough, this deck also runs 1 copy of Dark Gaia Force, which is kind of a shock to me. I don't know, I feel like if you're running Hades Force, like, what's the deal, you know? Why run anything else? But still an interesting deck nonetheless, and so if you're looking for something after the restricted list gets updated, then this is definitely an option. Another deck I want to take a look at is going to be Mirage Galgamon, which has done pretty well for itself last week. Now we see pretty standard lists here as far as like the Mirage Galgamon cards are concerned. Nice 2-of Shotgomon here just to rain on things like Jessamon as well as Green's Parade, being able to stop those Digivolution costs from being reduced. The BT13 Mirage Galgamon finds a lot of really good utility in being able to send Tamers back to your opponent's hand. So if your opponent has one of the 4-cost Marcuses on board, that's a prime target for this guy. And the fact that he has Evade as well is really useful. What I find most interesting about this deck is actually the Tamer splits. So at the lower levels, for level 5 and below, the 3-cost Tom from BT4 is super useful, allowing you to attack and then unsuspend. And then combining him with Nikolai Petrov is really useful because he gives those Digimon jamming. So if you can have jamming and unsuspending, you can use those lower levels really efficiently. However, once you get to your burst mode in this deck, honestly, the 4-cost Tom Tamer is actually more useful. Because he has the effect of being able to attack, and if your opponent has more than 8 cards in hand, you can discard one and then unsuspend the burst mode. If you have multiple copies of the level 4 on the field, whenever you attack, you can rest them and make your opponent draw a card. And because Burst Mode's effect isn't locked to once per turn, as long as your opponent's hand size keeps increasing, you can keep discarding cards and unsuspending. So when you take a look at the build of the Tamers for this deck, you can really see what the player's game plan is. And this one is actually pretty even, so I like the split here between, of course, 4 copies of Tom and then 2 of the other Tom and then Nikolai Petrov. And then finally, one small thing. This player does run 2 copies of the Full Moon Meteor Impact. I think some other players or other lists that I've seen run 1 copy of this and then 1 copy of Ice Wall, but honestly, it feels like it's down to preference. So the last deck that I want to highlight is going to be the Anubismon deck that I talked about before. Honestly, if you're looking for a budget deck to build that's got a little bit of muscle behind it, then I think for purple, this is a fantastic idea. So we see all the cards from the Proto-Gizemon engine, things like the Eismon, as well as all the Proto-Gizemon that we talked about before. And then we've also got some of those get effects off of discarding cards, which are things like Nidhoggmon, as well as the Calling of the Underworld. And then we see the cards from the Anubismon engine here too. So Anubismon, of course, going to be your satellite. You want to get this guy up and then start to get your game plan going. We see Blue Meramon as a really cool level 5 choice for this deck. Does so many things. He cycles, he has retaliation, and he gives you that really nice effect of gaining memory whenever you play Digimon by an effect. And because all the Proto-Gizemon do this, he's a fantastic choice. We also see cards like Ginkagumon, which I haven't seen in so long, but has a really nice effect of gaining memory whenever you discard cards, so finds a perfect spot in the deck. And then also cards like Ignitemon, who not only have the similar effect to Blue Meramon, but also having that nice little effect of being able to swing and destroy a Digimon. Now that's useful as a backup in case one of your Proto-Gizemon attack security and aren't deleted via the security card. And then this deck has a host of supporting Tamer and option cards. We see the Mimi Tamer here to gain memory off of playing option cards, and we see a lot of the 1-cost and 2-cost option cards at the same time. Things like Calling of the Darkness, as well as Demon Disaster, which is a great choice. Again, in case one of your Proto-Gizemon don't die on security check, give it another go. And then, of course, you gotta have at least 1 copy of Night Raid in here, just so that you can either get your Gizemon engine going or pull something back cheaply and get a free swing. And so if you're looking for a purple build that's not gonna break the bank, this is a really, really good idea. Anyways, folks, that's going to be it for this week's Japanese Meta Report. I want to say thank you to all of the folks who commented last week and gave their input on me either combining or not combining Bloom Quartz and Rosemon as a deck. And so thanks to your comments, I'm going to keep those guys separated as we go forward into the future. Anyways, folks, thanks again for watching. I'm going to get out of here. Before you get out of here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.